Welcome to a very special edition of Roundtable Charlotte. Today we have a panel of Black women artists and the Black woman curator who brought them all together. The exhibit Black Blooded is being hosted at the New Gallery of Modern Art in Uptown Charlotte, and it's built like a family photo album with close to 70 pieces by 50 artists. The group exhibition demonstrates the diversity and nuance within narratives of tradition, consanguinity, and origin. Enjoy this public conversation with artists Stephanie J. Woods, Brianna Robinson, and Carmen Neely about their work, life, and education and how it ties into the show Black Blooded.
So the ladies were kind enough to give us some resources for tonight, some literary resources. So in the back of the room, on the table with the books, we do have a chapter from Roxane Gay's Bad Feminist. It's just a short chapter that Carmen suggested. So feel free to pick that up. If you want to take the entire book of essays home, you can check out that copy that's in the back there. That book is in house, and I had to fight a couple people to get a copy here tonight. So if you would like that, please pick that up. Also, the ladies did choose a selection of books to recommend tonight as well that will pair with this discussion, and then some quotes down here from Black women that kind of inspired them, just some words of wisdom here. So feel free to pick that up as well on the table that has the books on it as well. So feel free to pick that up. Killing some trees tonight. And then on the table when you first came in, there is a large piece of paper that has the events for our library going on this summer. If you feel like coming back to Main Library, showing us some more love, feel free to pick this up and come back to our library, any library this summer. We have a summer learning program going on where you can log activities and read. And then I would like to happily announce, maybe some of you have been a part of my film series last year. I focused on Black women, wanted to center, obviously, a group that is highly marginalized in our community. And then this year coming up, I'm actually going to focus on Black men, and it's going to be called The Vulnerable Black Man. So if you would like to be on the newsletter list for this film series starting in August, pick up this little flyer that's on that table as well, and I will start sending out the titles of the movies that we're doing in probably the next 2 weeks or so. All of the movies will have a discussion afterward, and we try to have people like Ms. Jessica Moss here to lead discussion after the film. So definitely check that out as well. So we are going to get started here, and what I would like the ladies to do is just to introduce themselves. I was going to do some formal introductions, but we don't need to do that. And we're all family here. Our videographer is going to start recording, so just be mindful. There's a camera here and a camera there. So if you get up to get water or a snack or to use the restroom, just be mindful of that, okay? And whenever, yes?
May I ask that they do a formal introduction, just because we're family. And we soon to know each other.
Oh, yes.
And I think people are earning their position. So it would be, I would love to hear a formal introduction.
Well, I'm going to let them do that for themselves. Yes. No, I think we should have formal introductions. I'm just not going to do it for you.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I misspoke. Yes. Okay. And test the mics right quick for me.
Testing. Testing.
Testing. Sorry, we have to turn on. Sorry.
Testing. Testing.
Okay. Great.
Well, thank you, Angela. Before we begin, I'd just like to say welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here at the library on a Thursday evening. It means the world to all of us for you all to just show up. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Secondly, before we begin with the introductions of the artists, Black Blooded has been an opportunity to activate multiple spaces in the city of Charlotte through the arts as a catalyst. And this doesn't have to stop when this exhibition ends. And so when you all leave today, I hope you feel challenged, to continue the conversation beyond tonight's dialogue. This can be amongst each other or beyond, but I hope that you accept the challenge. Angel mentioned that we have collaborated before, and so before you leave today, if there are other itching urges to potentially collaborate with any of these women on the stage, we will be available after the dialogue to host conversations with each of you. So I hope that you consider sticking around after our formal Q&A this evening. Lastly, as you all know, this is Uptown Crawl, which means major art institutions and galleries along Uptown Charlotte's Tryon are open late this evening. So if you haven't yet seen the exhibition at the new gallery, Black Blooded, please make an effort to stop by after our dialogue today. We'll be open there till 9 o'clock, and if you stay later, we'll stay later. So thank you. I'm Jessica Moss, and before I introduce myself, I'd like to start with the artist because this is why we are all here today. So Stephanie, if you don't mind beginning.
Well, my name is Stephanie J. Woods. I consider myself an interdisciplinary artist, so I work in sculpture, video, and photography. A lot of the work that I make deals with exploring the identity of African American women, specifically Black women in America, and how we navigate throughout Western society.
Hi, my name is Carmen Neely. I'm a North Carolina native. I consider myself an interdisciplinary artist, predominantly a painter. I work in mixed media, graduate from an MFA program at UNC Greensboro, and I'm still in the area. My subject matter deals also with identity, but through the lens of abstraction and formalism.
Hi, I'm Brianna Robinson, and I'm a recent college graduate. I'm a photographic artist, and a lot of my work, I have work that kind of deals with me personally, but I feel like anyone of any race, background could relate to it. And then I also have work that are geared more towards the Black community, about kind of how all the pressures are put onto us by this American society, and then kind of how that affects us in the long run. So, yeah.
And then Angel, so I'm Angel Truesdale. I work here at the main library. I've been with the library for about over 7 years now. I'm a grad of UNC Charlotte and a recent grad with my master's in library science. And I think the library really wants to build a community and a culture and to celebrate things like this in our community, Black art, things that are really trying to do different things in our community. So I hope that you will visit the exhibit and reach out and request that we do more things like this in our libraries and in our communities.
Thank you, Angel. So again, my name is Jessica Moss, and I'm the curator of Black Blooded. Black Blooded is an exhibition that features 50 artists and 70 works. The entire goal of the exhibition is to showcase not only the diversity that exists within Blackness, but also the nuance. Often, when we see exhibitions that relate to identity or Blackness, even still there are issues with being tokenized or being labeled as one. And so Black Blooded is meant to show the multitude and that spectrum of what Blackness can be. There are dialogues of gender, sexuality, identity, and beyond. And each of these ladies who's present on the stage today is here and a part of the exhibition because they filled a void, right? That's part of that challenge that we were talking about earlier. These voids are present, and often we see them, and it's our responsibility, as John Love told us last night at our recent dialogue at the new gallery, it's our responsibility to fill those voids. Carmen Neely is a Black female abstract painter. How many can you name? I'll wait. Who are alive, under 50, I'll wait. It's important that she's here. It's important that her work is present in our spaces, right? Carmen and I met because, like most of these people on the stage today, she's from North Carolina. It's easier to have conversations with people who are close, so we began in a close relationship. Having the ability to show her work means so much more, and having the opportunity to disseminate this as a representational figure also means so much more. I went to high school with Stephanie J. Wood's brother, Myers Park here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Stephanie is, I think, maybe 2 classes below, 2 or 3 classes below, but has been making work since we've known each other in high school. Again, having the opportunity to showcase this work, someone who is a Charlotte native, means that people who also are from this place can see the possibilities and the opportunities that can exist for them, right? Stephanie's work is the signature image for our exhibition, Black Blooded. It was interesting, the selection of this, because immediately the discussion became, oh, it's dark, that's macabre. It's kind of scary. Why would you choose this? So I'll let Stephanie talk about that a bit more, but I think that's important to introduce as a part of the dialogue. Brianna Robinson is a really recent grad from UNCC in their fine art program. She just graduated this past May. I met Brianna because during my time at the Gann Center, often I was called to participate in critiques or criticisms with students in the area. It became quite a surprise to me when I was late, which I often am. And the professor said, oh, Jessica's here. Brianna, you can begin your critique. There was something interesting in the room. Brianna and I were only the 2 faces of color present in the space. And then it became apparent to me that the rest of the students and the professors felt uncomfortable speaking about the work because of her self-portraits. They felt like they couldn't relate. This was a problem. I spoke to the dean. Brianna and I are friends now. I'd like to start the dialogue with that note. Obviously, our discussion tonight is about inclusion and accessibility within academia. Although higher learning is not required for access within fine arts, it's unique and interesting that all of these women on the stage have higher learning education degrees. And I think that's something that we should really unpack this evening. So before we begin, before we continue, I'd like for that first question, our first point of dialogue to be specifically, what was your experience like in undergrad relating to others within your fine art classes and having to often identify as being othered? I'd like to start with you, Carmen.
I think that for me, so like all of us here, when I was an undergraduate in a BFA program, I was still typically the only person of color in a class. There were no faculty members of color that I had as resources. But when I went to graduate school and pursued my MFA, was when your relationships with those professors become deeper, become more intimate. Your relationship with the work becomes deeper and more intimate, and with your peers as well. You're in group critiques and you're talking about things beyond just the surface level of, aesthetics at this point. So those kind of disparities became more noticeable and a lot more impacting for me, I think, in graduate school. And interestingly, the sort of absence that I felt of seeing people like me in the space, having people sort of understand my voice and perspective, and also feeling that absence in work that was presented to me, right? By mentors, by people in the program as references, did help to lead me on the path that I've taken with my own work. I started focusing on abstraction when I was a graduate student, and I obviously was drawn to people like Robert Rauschenberg, Cy Twombly, these big abstract expressionist white male names that we're all taught really heavily in undergrad, that their names are continued to be pushed on us as graduate students as well. And I sought out other influences from faculty members that were my mentors. They were on my thesis committee. I'm looking for women of color who are making similar work that I can sort of draw from, that I can learn from. And I was told on more than one occasion, well, I don't know of any, and I don't know if there really were women of color doing this work. I think they were focused on other things, right? And it became very apparent to me that these were people just kind of regurgitating information, right, that we all inherited, right, through all these years of academia, and they hadn't done this work independently to seek out other answers to these questions, so I had to do that work myself. And in doing that work, I've learned, right, that people of color often have to do that work for themselves, of documenting our own histories, of recording our voices and sharing them so that those names are heard and learned about, talked about. And so in my own work, that became a part of my process. It became a really important part to me of reincarnating gestures that I make in abstraction, making them over and over and over again and signifying that they are important and that they're invaluable. I do that to gestures in different formats. So I'll take something that was a gesture in paint or a mark made on a canvas and turn it into something that's three-dimensional out of clay. It becomes a three-dimensional sculpture. It becomes a cutout out of plexiglass, and on and on and on, right? But all of these things live on and they continue to live on, and I'm taking on the work of doing that for myself because it's important that I do that. And within this whole history, right, of contemporary art practice. So that's one large way that being a minority in academia and a studio art program has impacted me.
I guess I'm gonna kind of go off of what Carmen said about teaching yourself. That was a major thing for me, where it was, there were moments when there would be like critiques, and it was more I had to teach the teacher before they could teach me. So a lot of times giving a lot of background information and cultural references in order for us to even begin a conversation. And so to me, that was a little disappointing to have to teach someone where I'm paying to get an education. And so I did end up in kind of the same situation where I was diving into being able to educate myself. So for me, being in academia was more about having the time and having the resources to set that time aside for myself to say, okay, I'm interested in finding more Black artists because they're not being shown in our classes, and how can I use this time to benefit me? And so that was a really big issue. And I think that is an issue that a lot of students, even my own students, when I taught at VCU Arts, I would have like maybe 3 or 4 Black students in my class, and they would come up to me and talk about how they didn't feel comfortable enough to be able to talk to their other teachers because there was this moment where instead of them learning, they're teaching the teacher first. And so that was a major issue with me within academia. But outside of that, like having the time and the resources to be able to sit down and educate myself was really beneficial to my practice and where I am now.
I feel like for me, like at the start of college, I really took a lot of influences from like techniques rather than themes. And so I never really thought about being influenced by what other, I guess, artists' themes. But because, you know, I had what I wanted to say at first, and then getting more into the like nitty gritty of school, I've kind of like been warned about how, you know, the industry is white male dominated, and that you know, me being an artist who is African American and I use either myself or other African Americans as the subject, that people more often than not are probably gonna think like my work has to do about Black identity or race and things like that. And a lot of my work really doesn't have to do with anything racial at all. And so I kind of felt this kind of like divide between me and the art world. And I think that really influenced the way I went about creating more work while I was in school. And I feel like it's still a dilemma for me now, because I feel like I'm at a place where I'm stuck in my art making. So, yeah.
That's brilliant, Brianna, and that brings up a really good point. One of the artists who's in the exhibition Black Blooded is Martin Puryear, and something that we all know about Martin Puryear is that Martin Puryear is an artist, period. Right? You see the sculpture. The sculpture can, question mark, be separated from the identity, question mark. And so I ask this question to each of you ladies. How hard is it? Is it possible? Is it necessary to separate the identity of yourself from the object that you make? Carmen?
I think that on some level, we will always have that notion attached to our work. That is an unavoidable quality of being a non-white artist, truthfully. And that doesn't necessarily have to hinder or impede like any work that you want to make right outside of a genre or an association, but I think it's an unavoidable part of our practice, just because we will always deal with projections. I think for me, identity is important in my work, and it's not always. Sometimes I relate to what you were saying about how the content, the subject matter, right, of the reason why you wanted to take the picture in the first place was maybe not necessarily to deal with the subject matter, but somehow in the process, your identity is there, so we can't escape all of these things. These experiences, even beginning in academia, shape the way we think about making art, the way we navigate the art world. It's all a part of it. And so I think that for me, the process is so important and so relevant to my identity, and I accept and understand that may not come through immediately just upon seeing the work sort of face value in person, but there is sort of deeper understanding embedded in what's there for me.
For me, my identity is very important. I feel like I want someone to be able to look at my work and tell that a Black woman made it. I don't know why at this point, why it's that important, but I definitely want my identity to be present even when I'm not present in the room. And I definitely feel like, because you'll think about like the Wakanda movie, how they said hashtag representation matters. And so for me, that it's something that's really important to me, is that the representation of Black people, Black bodies within a typically white space, even if it's not a figure, but something that is a cultural reference, is really important and a prominent part of my making.
Often those cultural references become languages in themselves, right? Visual languages. I encourage all of you, while she's here, this is a 2-month residency at the McCall Center. I don't know, you probably only have 1 month left now. So the clock is ticking. But I highly encourage you all to visit the McCall Center while Stephanie is here. In preparation for this evening's panel, we all went for a studio visit and got an opportunity to see the work that she's working on currently. And something happened when we walked into that studio. For me, it became very apparent that that language is real. There are satin bonnets hanging from the walls. There are mirrors around that say Black girl magic. There is a deconstruction and an unpacking of these things that just became so overwhelmingly present to me that it was a light bulb. And I asked Stephanie if I was alone in that reaction. If when other people who looked like us walked in the space, if they had a similar response. Angel, do you remember this moment? Would you mind reflecting on it a bit with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were both kind of in awe and kind of thinking, in a space like that, we felt kind of this was a moment between Black people, Black women that we could have together, and that we could enjoy, and we could look at her art and really find our places in there. I also think that, you know, we kind of talked about how it could be perceived by white people, and I thought that that was an interesting conversation for me, because I thought, you know, sometimes I don't think about that. I try not to think about that, because I want to consume things for myself and for other people like me. But I do think, like, when we walked into that space and we were looking at those satin bonnets, we were like, this is dope. This is amazing. She is doing good work. And this is something we can, all of us could identify with. And we didn't even really need her to explain what was happening in this room and what the art that was on the wall, because we could, a satin bonnet, let me go get mine right now.
I wanted to also add, because this is something that I think you've done so well in your curation of Black Blooded, is to show how multifaceted that dialogue can be, these conversations can be, and how these sort of signifiers are not just stereotypical, right, symbols, and not just photographs of Black bodies. There is such a span of work represented in the show that I really appreciate, and that all of the artists in the opening, many people were in town, came in from New York, came in from Chicago. We all had conversations about how we had never had an opportunity to be in a show that diverse of Black voices before. It's really powerful. And while you all were thinking, I was sort of reminded of, there was a show that happened in DC at the end of last year called Magnetic Fields. That was like the first show of Black female abstract artists. It was incredible. And I don't remember the particular artist that there was an article written about it, but I think was on Art News. One of the artists was reflecting back on her days making abstraction in New York in the 70s, and that an art dealer told her she would have better luck if she got one of her white friends to take the work around for her and shop it to galleries and introduce it to curators. Because it's not work that looks Black, right? This isn't what you're gonna make that's gonna sell. And I see that voice represented, right? The fact that I can also share a stage with Stephanie, and that we're both dealing with identity from two totally different angles and perspectives, but that they're still simultaneously Black voices, is really powerful. So I take another moment to thank you for that opportunity and highlight how smart and really unique the show is.
Thank you, Carmen. I didn't pay her to say that. But I appreciate that. That's the entire point. All right, I'd like to switch and talk about labor. So much of what we've been talking about is getting up to catching up, or even having to educate yourself because that information isn't provided. I watched Scandal when it was on TV, and I will never forget that scene with Olivia Pope and her dad, where he says, you have to work twice as hard, because that was my mama always telling me that when I was younger. So to see it reflected on a mainstream channel, again, representation matters. I felt like I could relate, right? And it meant more than just me. It felt like we all have to work harder to even just be up to fluff, right? This labor is taxing, but it's not new to Black women. When you are in these institutions, be it academia or within your careers, and you feel this labor weighing down on you, to whom do you look to? Are there certain texts or authors who are significant to you in seeing this labor that they also went through? Maybe this provides some sort of optimism or hope to continue, or maybe not. Who are you reading? What's encouraging you? What makes you go forth? Brianna?
Well, I think for me, I wouldn't say necessarily text, but when I see other Black artists, like I would follow them on Instagram and things like that, just to see how they can kind of see all their success and growth, and seeing them from, you know, their work from years ago and to now, that kind of leads me to get some kind of hope for myself in the industry. And then I feel like I like this quote by Toni Morrison, and she says, if there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. And so for me, that really touches on my, I guess, conversation with myself about doubt. I feel like I always doubt myself when it comes to this industry, or just in general. And I feel like a good bit of that doubt is, you know, because I'm Black. So I often think, you know, because I'm Black, can I, you know, do this? Can I do that? Can I, you know, be this like prominent figure in this art world or in anything else? So yeah, I feel like just hearing or just reading what she said, you know, I feel like I have to like look at all the things that I'm privileged with, and that can like move me forward into, you know, outside of that fight of doubt and stuff. So.
She said privilege, so I know you have.
Well, and thinking about what you're saying, though, this is why representation matters so much, and in academia, there's not enough of it. There's not enough diverse representation. And I just think so many programs, like we were minorities in our grad programs, we're minorities now as part-time professors, right, as in part of our faculty. And people are not having these conversations about representation for the diverse groups of students, right, that they are educating. And the first semester I was teaching while I was a grad student, I had a Black female student come up to me at the end of class in the second week, and she was just like, I didn't know that that people like us were in this field. I didn't know that there were teachers like us. I've never had anybody that looked like you as an art professor. I didn't know if I was gonna make it because I hadn't seen any work that was like speaking to me. Nobody's like talking about these things, but this class, like just me being present in the space was enough to like be super symbolic for her and leave a lasting impact. And so in talking about, I requested that Peculiar Benefits from Bad Feminist was a text that people could take with them and have and read and share potentially with other people, because it's relevant to think about. Roxane Gay talks a lot about privilege in that article, and she does it in a really like succinct and smart way by pointing out that we all carry certain benefits, right, in some aspect of our life. And that to point out those benefits that particular people have in certain contexts is not an accusation. That we should start to think about talking about privilege as an observation, right? And that I think that if we're in spaces where there's a disparity and we're having conversation about what it is, pointing it out, calling it right by its name, that then we can start to address how to deal with that, how to not have students of color feel like, because no one here looks like me, I don't know if this is my field, if this is the industry, and I have all this self-doubt now. So, yeah.
I think for me, what helps me like navigate through those spaces is kind of, I guess my mother, like seeing her like being such a strong woman, but also knowing that I'm like one of the first. Because at VCU Arts, in the Arts Foundations program, I was the first African American woman to teach. However, there is another Black teacher, Sonia Clark. She's in the craft.
Did y'all hear that?
And I'm an adjunct.
Take that. Take that. Oh, receive that.
But there's Sonia Clark. She's in the Craft and Material Studies Department, and she's been there for years. She's the director of that program. But for adjuncts that coming directly out of basic graduate school, going into the program, into Art Foundations program, they're really selective of who's going there. But being able to walk around, they're doing that because they have a diversity initiative where they're trying to bring in more African American artists to teach at their university, but being able to walk around and look at someone else and say, okay, we're here to make a difference and to inspire the students that are here that are feeling marginalized and like as though they're not included. That helps me navigate through it. And then also just knowing that I'm students that are not even marginalized, that are not a part of that group, knowing that I'm able to offer them something other than what they're accustomed to seeing, knowing that when they come into my class, I'm offering them more variety of artists to look at. It just keeps me going knowing that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Can we give her another round of I want to bring light to something. Thanks for joining us. All of these women who are present here on this stage have an active practice. Being an artist with a capital A requires so much work and so much effort. I can't imagine, in addition to having to labor through Western art history, having to also labor through making up our own histories and acknowledging and providing visibility to them. Carmen said that she does it through her work, right? Through repeating symbols over and over again to validate their existence. I think we see it present in Stephanie's work as well, with motifs and symbols that are a visual language that is unique to us. Constantly using self-portraiture as a tool activates the self and illuminates the identity. And so Brianna Robinson's work is indefinitely important. And as such a young scholar, I think she's incredibly brave for being here today and sharing that story with us. It has been 30 minutes since we've been chatting, and at this point, I'd love to open up the floor to questions. Jordan, the mic is here if you'd like it, but also feel free to use your voices and project. I started off this conversation asking you all to identify Black female artists of different disciplines. Just because you don't know their names does not mean they don't exist. Do your homework tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Questions? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a celebrity in the building with us today. B. Noel deserves the most formal introduction. B. Noel is a legend and an architect for our city here in Charlotte. Not only did she create the first female Black-owned gallery in our city, but she has continued to do this work across the nation. So before I hand her the mic, can I answer the question that I just asked the group? How do you go forward? Where do you get inspiration?
Thank you, and I want you to know that I really honor each one of you and the work that you do, both as creatives and as professors, scholars, and curators. And just for a point of fact, since we are talking about doing our homework, myself if I didn't make the clarity that Dr. Regina Perry was at VCU, and I just want to give you her background because it's important to know that Dr. Perry is considered Professor Emeritus of Art History at Virginia Commonwealth University. She earned her PhD in Art History from the University of Pennsylvania in 1965.
Wow.
And she became the first African American woman to hold a doctorate in art history and the first African American to hold a doctorate in American art. She's a dynamo. If you are at VCU,
I think you misunderstood me because I was saying specifically in the Art Foundations program.
Oh, I see.
So I teach to students that come directly out of high school, and so this is their first year at VCU. So in the Arts Foundations program, usually they have adjuncts that graduate from graduate schools. And so directly after you come out of school, you begin to teach at an adjunct lower level. And so in that particular, they have many different departments. We have like sculpture, photography, graphic design, art history. But in that particular department, they haven't had a.
well, I lift her name because I tell you she will fuel, if you know her, you will be fueled to do anything you want to do in your career. She was a powerhouse, and I'm telling you, she's an inspiration for generations of women in academia. So I just wanted to make
Say
that
her name,
point.
please.
Her name again is Dr. Regina Perry.
Yeah, I kind of have two questions. One, as Black people teaching in predominantly white institutions, and the labor you have to do, right, because of that, this extra labor you have, do you think, because I teach at a predominantly white institution, do you think you should be compensated for that extra labor? Because I've had Black students in my office crying for years, and I have to convince them to not leave school. And it's kind of, I mean, I think Stephanie Carmen kind of said they had some experiences. Also, this is slightly different. Stephanie said that representation matters, and it does, but also, more so to Jessica, also representation matters when it's behind closed doors, and being a person of color in the room. Could you talk a little bit about that when it's not, you know, on Instagram or in marketing, but when you're in the room where they're making those decisions? Can you talk a little bit about that, having to speak up or be that perspective that probably wouldn't be?
And specifically within like academia, like teaching and having other professors like around me, is that what you're asking?
Academia and in the art, like both, right? Like being in like, you know, being in, you know, meetings and academia, but also on juries or when you're curating, right? Having those conversations with institutions.
Yeah, I think, and I feel like I've benefited from that behind closed doors because a lot of the grants that I've gotten, when I look at the jury that's on there, it's some Black artists that I either had some conversation with in the past, or it feels like they're able to look at my work and be able to understand it, which has granted me things that I've gotten in the past. But I would also say, what you were saying, like behind closed doors, whereas VCU, they do have a diversity initiative. And so they actually offer money to minorities at VCU if you have like great ideas on how to help with diversity inclusion. So they have grants that they'll give you. But the thing about that is the grant that they're giving you is not enough for as much as they're asking for, because you go to that meeting and every bit of you is just drained, because on top of telling all of the issues, now I'm teaching centuries of history in the room, which is definitely should be compensated way more. I think the grant is like $500 for the entire semester, which is pennies on top of teaching and also being a presence in the classroom. Because I've had numerous students that will come up to me and say, what do you do? Why are you here? They don't even know that I'm a teacher. And it's like, I'm the teacher. And then one student's like, oh, that's dope. Oh, wow, I didn't know that there was like a Black teacher here. And so definitely like just being a presence in that room and not needing to have it in the work is, I feel is inspiring for the students. But then also in the meetings, being able to speak up is important, but then also knowing when I've exhausted enough energy in trying to solve this problem.
I want to add that if there were more of us in the room, it wouldn't feel like we're all individually working overtime, right? So I think that's really the issue that needs to be tackled. And also largely, like, part of the text that I chose is emphasizing that everybody, right, is responsible in some way for dealing with privilege once it's acknowledged. So it shouldn't just be us. Like, yes, we are there for particular students with particular needs, and yes, our representation and visibility matters in that sense. But also, we should have advocates as our colleagues on faculty, the administration should also be aware of these issues that we're handling and be supporting us. And I think those conversations are just not really being had. And so I think we should need to be compensating because there needs to be more done. It needs to be more of a collective effort.
I'd like to be compensated. Yes, sir.
I just had a question. I just recently moved here from New Jersey, and I graduated from the School of Performing Arts up there 1,000 years ago. But that was back in the 80s. And my teacher was female and she was black. And you guys saying that you're an anomaly was like so weird to me because that was the norm for me. I started high school in 1980, and my teacher was black. She ended up being the vice principal and the principal of the School of Performing Arts that fame is based on out in New York. It started in Newark, New Jersey. So I was just wondering, do you find that the dynamic in the South is different than the North? Like there are more African-American female artists prominently, doing what they do in the North than in the South? Because when you said that, it was that was like so weird. Because my teacher's name was Aletha Caldwell. They actually named part of the museum in Newark after her because she became the first black female principal of the Performing Arts School in New Jersey. So I was just that's like so strange to me. I was just wondering, is there a dynamic? Is it because it's the South? Is that why you guys don't get your due, or is it just I don't understand?
How many of you all share a similar sentiment? Can I see raising of hands in the room?
Similar to which side of the
To
circle?
this gentleman's question, and feeling that it's kind of weird, the reflections on the stage, that maybe you saw a number of black leaders in your space, or had a number of black mentors or teachers. Maybe a show of hands of people who felt that.
Actually, I'd like to share a little bit to some degree on that. And I feel like it is a bit of a regional issue.
Okay.
So, coming from a PWI from K through 12 and then back in grad school, there was definitely certain social dynamics culturally and socially. Also a lack of representation of black role models, black teachers. But then when I went to A&T for undergrad, and the dynamics completely changed. In fact, my entire mentality had changed. It went from me feeling like the black atlas book for other cultures to understand people that look like me, to just being a person in a community and actually thinking about what worth and value do I just carry as a human being, as an artist, as a creative, and so on. And as far as representation, kind of thinking that it's weird that we're having this conversation, I think it really depends where you're coming from. If you come from an area where that's prominent, and I'm realizing that's in certain areas, that's one thing. But when you go to completely void areas, like maybe out in the Midwest or certain states, there's very few of us. It's a completely different dynamic. You're like a unicorn to some people. And actually, that I kind of wanted to hear more about y'all's thoughts on representation in certain areas, and I guess accessibility to that information. I feel like in a world of technology, there's no excuse, but that's also coming from a guy who grew up in a major city in the East Coast, never in the rural areas of the country.
Well, thank you both for those great points. The 50 artists who are present in the exhibition Black Blooded, I think all of their stories and narratives are relevant and legitimate. And many of them might have had similar experiences as you, but I think more of them hadn't.
Okay.
And these artists are international. The women that accompany me on the stage are from North Carolina, but many of the artists in the show are from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Toronto, Sweden, Germany. The list continues. And an entire goal of the show is to show those connections between them despite the geography or the amount of melanin or how they choose to identify. There is a connection, and it's meant to show that diversity. So I hope that you know that your narrative is respected in this space, as all of ours are, and we honor those differences in opinions.
Let me just say, I didn't understand, because like I said, where I'm from is most of my teachers were black, so that was my normal. But I commend all of you guys, because I know you guys down here, it's just different. And just keep doing what you're doing. I'm an artist today because of a black woman. So thank you. And thank you for what you do.
Would anyone like to touch on Jordan's question? Was it technology? I'm so sorry.
No, just what are your thoughts on the idea about representation in different areas? Like, where people think, like, yeah, why, this is a normal thing where I'm from. Why are we having a discussion like this? Whereas people are like, no, this is needed. And kind of like speaking on, I guess, representation based on where people are coming from, if that makes sense.
I guess I'll speak to this a little bit. So I'm from Southern California, city of Orange. This is the TV show Orange County. The people who are of color there in the TV show are in servitude roles. In reality, it doesn't exist this way, but this is what's seen on the media. I experienced more racism in my life in Southern California than I ever have in the South. I'll say that, factually. I don't think racism fills geographical borders. I don't think prejudice follows planes in that way. I think, have you guys been to Carowinds and done the thing where you jump between North Carolina and South Carolina? Do you feel more pride or more prejudice in one side of that jump than the other? Because I don't. In the study of property law in the past year when I was at University of Pittsburgh, thinking about the history of Black people being owned as property, and the borders and the laws and the mechanisms that have been built in this country to continue to think of us in this way, are incredibly limiting. And I wonder what happens if we stop honoring them and choose to make our own borders. Does that answer your question, Jordan? Any more questions in the audience?
I would like to pose maybe just to the room how we free Brianna from a burden, because I think you do make the point that as an African American woman, sometimes you feel burdened to carry a racial representation that others do not. And I love the juxtaposition that Stephanie is like, I want you to know. I don't want you to have a doubt. And so, because that is the truth in all of it, right? If we had a pound cake contest, there are people who say, oh, I knew that was a black woman, she put on right? But how do we really know? And so you should be free to do your pound cake and your pound cake and your pound cake, and not have, and as particularly as a young artist. And at the end of the day, because you're young, you may not be aware that of all of the people who have entered into that conversation before, but nobody is going to enter into it the way only you uniquely can. So, I just say to you, as someone who is looking at images all day long and accepting and rejecting work all day long, that what most own your work. We're going to honor the juxtaposition of the abstract and the figurative and the mysterious. And, you know, for all of you, I think that is the most vital and important thing to do, because the wings will change, and the person who's judging that screen today is not going to even notice it tomorrow. You have to find your true north in all the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what I took from that is, you know, beyond going to Black Blooded, beyond buying their artwork, please buy their artwork. What do you ladies, what would you say you need as support as artists, beyond that? Because I think that that's ways that may be obvious, hopefully it's obvious. But if it's not obvious, what ways could people support you and maybe ease that labor, even as, you know, as a student, what could that have been, or even as teachers, what could that have been or look like?
I just need some more shows. So if you want to put me in a show, please. That's all I need. That's what I need.
I think that, again, everyone needs to take some responsibility to have these conversations about the privilege or lack of representation in whatever field or aspect, right, that you're participating in. I think if more people were having open dialogues about these issues, right, like I said, administrations, faculty, groups of faculty, that, because these things, we're hearing like these issues sort of trickle down. We're just like inheriting the same problems and reliving them through generations, and that can change if we start to talk more openly about them. And I think that, right, this idea that we have to carry this burden on our own, which is partially true, and in some ways our presence serves a particular, right, role, but that we should not have to keep feeling like, okay, just because I am the only one and maybe the only one here for some time, that I have to carry all of this weight alone and like just be quiet when I know it, like, right? There's more to be said, but I'm the only person who can say it, or be quiet because I don't want to be the difficult Black person. Or we need allies. We need everybody to be having these conversations together. So that's what I need.
Well, I would say kind of like the same. I really loved, like a week ago when we were having that conversation, even though I know I barely said anything in the conversation, but for me, I mean, I was just trying to take everything all in, because, you know, I never really got to sit with a group of Black girls or just Black people in general and kind of like talk about our place in this industry, and I really appreciated that, and I feel like I need more of that. I needed that when I was in school, and I need that now, so, yeah.
Thank you again to everyone who joined us this evening. Again, y'all showed up, and that means more than you can imagine to all of us. If you, again, haven't had a chance to see Black Blooded, we're heading there now. We'll stick around and talk to you guys here in this space, but make sure to check out the exhibition. It's been extended for the duration of this summer, so if you can't see it tonight, that's okay. We'll be up until the 26th of August. We have more programming scheduled for the coming month, as well as the following, so stay tuned. You can find all of us online on social media, which you know is how everything works now. So Stephanie, how do people find you?
Stephanie J. Woods.
Say it louder.
Stephanie J. Woods.
Carmen Neely, and also my website, carmenaliz.com.
My handle is Brianna_Lene on Instagram.
Thanks so much for coming out tonight, you guys. I'll see you later.
Please take snacks and drinks to go with you, and please take
panel gave us hope and inspiration for Black art. The library is grateful that we could host an event like this in our main library. We hope you will join us for the next Roundtable Charlotte and make sure to check out our amazing digital content on the digital branch. We hope to see you in the library and in the community, and thank you for watching.